So now we already worked a lot with data, but up to this point, only with one model. And for some applications, that might be all you need, but for a lot of applications, you will probably have more than one data model. And you might especially have related data. So for example here, we could also say that we don't just have the meetup, but we will also have participants, so people who signed up for a meetup, and maybe also different locations. Because whilst we could add location here to the meetup and make it a char field maybe, so that a location is in the end just some text, whilst we could do that, we might want to make location its own model, its own class, so that we have a list of locations in our database. And then those locations can be mapped to our meetups so that we can't have New York in 3 differently written versions, but instead we have one New York entry in our database table, and we can then map multiple meetups to that New York location record, for example. That's why we might want to use a separate model for our location here, and then we would get a separate database table for our different locations. And hence here I'll add a new location class, which also inherits from models.model. And a location should have a name, let's say. And that could be a char field where we then have a max length of 200 again, maybe. This value is up to you. Now that's the name, something like New York or Broadway, New York. But then we might also want the exact address, which includes the street and the house number, something like that. And that's why I'll add an address field as well, which also is a char field of max length, let's say 300, whatever. And these two pieces together form a location, a short name, and then the exact address. Now we can also add this stir method here to already define how such a location should be represented if it's requested as a string. And here I'll return a f string where I just say self name, and then in brackets and parentheses thereafter, which is not a special syntax but just plain text, I'll output self.address. Address. Something like this. So that's now my location. We can, of course, also omit the address here from the string representation if we want to. Now, the interesting part is that, of course, there should be a connection between meetup and location. And that's a super common scenario. When you work with data, you often have relations. And there are 3 main types of relation we can differentiate. There is one-to-one, so that you have a one-to-one relation between 2 models. One-to-many, or many-to-one, it's the same. And many-to-many. Now we don't need one-to-one here, but here instead we have a one-to-many connection. Because one location can belong to many meetups, but one meetup will only have one location. So we don't have multiple locations per meetup, at least not in this app here. So that's a one-to-many scenario. We'll see many-to-many later. Now, how do we set up such a relation? Setting up a relation means that in the database for a meetup record, we need to store the ID of the related location record in a different table, in the locations table. So we need to store the ID of the location that belongs to this meetup. And again, Django makes that easy. We can simply add a location field here. That name is up to you though. It does not have to be the name of your related model, though it often will be, but it's not required. And then here we don't define a char field or a slug field or anything like that, but instead we get the foreign key value here, which we can create. This tells Django to set up a relation and to set up a one-to-many relation specifically. And then here we just point at the related model, so in my case, location. And again, Django will do all the rest behind the scenes. And technically in the database, it will only store IDs of related records later, not full instances. But we configure it just like this. We point at the location class here as a related class for this location field, and that's it for us. Now we just also can define what should happen if a location gets deleted, and therefore the related model is missing. And that's what we can set with the onDelete keyword argument. And we can set this to models cascade, which means that if a related record is deleted, this record will also be. So this meetup, this concrete meetup, will also be deleted. And that's not the only option you can choose here. You can also use set null to just set the location for this meetup to null, which might be more sensible, but it's up to you what you want to use here. I'll go with cascade. And now we set up such a relation. Now we need to make sure that locations can be managed through the admin area. And for that, in the admin py file, we can import location and then simply register it with admin site register location. We could also define an extra admin model here, but I don't want to do that at the moment. I don't want to fine-tune this right now. I'm fine with just registering location like this so that we can manage it in general. And now we need to do what? We need to create and run our migrations again because we did touch our models. We added a brand new model and we edited an existing model. And for both reasons, we need to make new migrations and run them to update our database. Now, just as before, I'll start by deleting that old meetup which I had because that's missing my location data, and therefore I'll temporarily comment out location again so that this works. And then now that this is gone, I'll comment back in location. And now we can make our migrations again. So run the make migrations command. And again, we get this question we saw before as well, because we already have a table for our meetups and now it's changing. And here I want to provide a one-off default. And again, I'll just pass in a dummy value here, which does not matter because we don't have any existing records. And now with that, the migrations are created and we can now run them by running the migrate command. And now these migrations were applied. And if we now bring up our development server again, and we go back to the admin panel to the home page, we see that we now also got locations here. And we can add new locations here. And for example, now we could add New York, and address is Broadway 1. I'm not sure if we could hold a meetup there, but we'll take it anyways. So I'll add that, and maybe add another one. And here I'll take Munich Creative Workspace, which is in Sum Street 5. And I'll save that as well. And now I got these two locations added here. Now, if we create a new meetup here, we don't just give it a title and an image as we did before, and a description, of course, our first meetup, yeah, but we also choose a location. And you see that we automatically get a drop down there where we can only choose from the locations we created in advance. So it's not some free text which we enter here, but we have this restriction which we want if we work with relations. We could also add a new related record here on the fly with this plus button, but I'll just go for New York and save that. And now my meetup is stored here. Now I also want to go back to the admin py file and actually make sure that we can filter based on location as well. And maybe not on the title actually, but just on location, and save this. And now you see if we had multiple meetups taking place in New York, I could filter for them. I can filter for all my locations. And that's all. Again, a lot of magic done by Django behind the scenes, and that's how easy it is to work with relations when working with Django.